Okay, good morning, everybody. So I hope everybody enjoyed, is enjoying Hanukkah, or a few days into it already. And hopefully, has everybody had an opportunity to watch some of our videos from the synagogue? We like the candle lighting we've been doing during the week. There's going to be another one tonight. The Cantor is doing a concert around 4 o'clock, I think. And
at
4 o'clock. We are, just in case you didn't get the message, we were going to have this drive-by Hanukkah thing this afternoon, but it's going to be rained out. So we're doing it tomorrow evening. Around 5, Jennifer?
From 4 to 5:30.
4 to 5:30 at Beth Yeshurun tomorrow, but I guess you have to register for that. So, but in any case, every night around Hanukkah lighting, candle lighting time, we'll be doing a video with somebody talking about Hanukkah. And my lunch and learn, I think, is on Thursday.
Wednesday.
A Wednesday.
Yeah, so Thursday is from the Kaplan Museum, the tour of the Hanukkah in our museum.
Oh yeah, that's definitely worth watching also. Yeah, so Wednesday at noon, I'm going to talk about the history of the menorah and the dreidel. And Thursday, Dr. Musher is going to show some of the wonderful museum pieces we have for Hanukkah, which would be pretty good. Okay, so let's get started today. Good morning, everybody. And today we're gonna talk about the Shema and its blessings. So we finished kind of talking about basic Jewish beliefs. We talked last week about Hanukkah. So now I'm going back to some of the other basic elements of describing Judaism. I did a general overview of Jewish prayer where I talked about the why we pray in Hebrew, why we have communal prayer, why we have fixed prayers in a prayer book, and sort of the two main structures of Jewish prayer, the Amidah, the standing prayer, and the other main structure is the Shema and its blessings. And the Shema and its blessings we do twice every day, following the injunction in Deuteronomy where it says you should speak these words when you lie down and when you rise up. So we took that literally, and every evening before we lie down, we recite the words. And in the morning when we wake up, we recite the words again. And what was done over the centuries was, it wasn't just Shema Yisrael, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. But the paragraph that follows it, you should love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and all your strength. And the few verses that follow that, some mnemonic devices to remind us of these words. We should teach them diligently to our children and speak about them at home and away and put them on the doorposts of our house. I'm going to go over this in a minute, right? So we added that whole paragraph. We added 2 other paragraphs from the Torah, which I'll talk about today. And then they encased those 3 paragraphs of Torah in a set of blessings, 2 blessings before, 2 blessings afterwards, or 1 blessing afterwards in the morning and 2 blessings afterwards in the evening. And that whole unit is called the Shema and its blessings, and we do that unit twice every day. So that's the unit we'll talk about today. And on another day, we'll come back and talk about the Amidah unit and what's in there. Okay, is everybody with me now? Everybody's awake? I had your coffee and caffeine. Okay, we're all caffeinated here? Okay. So I'm going to share the screen now and pull up the text, and we'll take a look and see what it says. Okay, here it is. So this is the first paragraph. It comes from Deuteronomy chapter 6, right? So first of all, let's look in the Hebrew. You're starting to learn Hebrew letters. I'm going to point to the Hebrew over here, and hopefully some of it will look somewhat familiar. Shema, remember Hebrew goes from right to left. Shema, which means listen up. Listen up, pay attention. Yisrael, talking to the people of Israel. Yud He Vav He, that's God's holy name. Note the vowels here. This is the 2 dots under it is the schwa sound, and the T-shaped vowel here, this little tiny T-shaped vowel under the Vav, is a called a kametz, and it's pronounced ah. So you would think, by the way, there's normally a dot over the hey up here, so then that would be pronounced like an O. So the vowels would be o, ah. And so you would think that with yud hey vav hey, it would be pronounced Yehovah, which is where Jehovah's Witnesses get the idea that God's name is pronounced Jehovah. But the reason these vowels are here is actually to tell us not to pronounce whatever this is, but to say Adonai instead, because those are also the vowels for the Hebrew letters that would spell out Adonai, which means my Lord, which is probably why Yud He Vav He gets translated as Lord. Not as in Lord of the Mansion or somebody who has been knighted in England, who is now a Sir or something, Lord or whatever, Lord of the whatever family, but Lord as in the Lord God. Yud He Vav He, though, is really God's name. I don't know if we talked about this before, but every Hebrew word has 4-letter roots, and has three-letter roots. And the 3 letters roots of the word tells you something about what the word means in the Hebrew language. It's kind of cleverly done that way, not like English. Certainly, English is kind of this bastard language that's from all different languages, and so it's a big mishmash of stuff. And that's why there's no rules to grammar in English. But in Hebrew, it was originally based on 3-letter roots. And once you find those 3 letters, you can tell something about the word. So the 3-letter roots for Yud He Vav He are He Vav He, which are unusual, first of all, because they're also vowel sounds. The He kind of has an ah sound, and the Vav could be an O or an U. So they're kind of quasi-vowel consonants in themselves. That's weird, right? That's not every consonant does that. So that's something weird about God's name, is that basically his name is composed of vowel consonants. But anyway, He Vav He are the 3 root letters. And the root means that the word has something to do with existence, to exist, to be existent, or maybe the source of existence, to be, as Shakespeare said, to be or not to be, right? So God is to be. Or as I like to say, perhaps God is the existent one. The one is the source of all existence. Everything that exists comes from the existent one. Or another way to think of it is God is the eternal one, the one who never ends, who always was and always will be. So it's an interesting thing about God's name. Anyway, but whatever it is, we don't pronounce it. Modern Bible scholars, I will break the rules now and tell you what my modern Bible scholars say. How the name was supposed to be pronounced, they think, was Yahweh, right? Which would be Yahweh. This Vav, the letter Vav, although we pronounce it as V, in German, V is pronounced like a W. And so the va and wa sound are both what linguists call labial sounds. They're made with our lips. And so they're somewhat interchangeable. And so some language scholars believe that the vav sound was originally pronounced as a W. And so his name would be Yahweh. But we don't know for sure if that's how it was pronounced. In any case, we don't ever pronounce that name. We just say Adonai. So, but the reason I go into all this detail is to tell you that when you say Adonai, you should think of God's name. And when you think of God's name, one way that we modern people, I think, is helpful for us to think about it is God is the eternal one, or the source of everything that exists, right? If you can't have an image for God, which we don't have, what are you supposed to think about when you think about God? Well, one thing is God is always existent, and another thing is God is the source of existence, and God is forever. So all those things are kind of encapsulated really in the Hebrew name for God. So Shema Yisrael, this existent one, is Eloheinu. Now, Elohim is the generic Hebrew word for God. And the new ending makes it our God, right? So this existent one is our God. This existent one, we're repeating his name again, is echad, is one. I spent a lot of time talking about this because this one sentence is considered one of the most important statements in the Bible for Jews. The idea, it's the essence of monotheism and the essence of our beliefs about God, that there is only one God and that God is eternal and the source of everything that exists. So that statement, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, kind of captures that essence of Jewish belief in one sentence. Now, another thing I want to point out in this opening sentence is you'll notice that the ayin, this letter here, and the daled, this letter over here, are larger than the rest of the letters. And that's not a typographical error. The printer who printed this edition of the Bible in Hebrew intentionally made these two letters larger because when scribes handwrite the Torah scrolls and they come to this verse in the Torah, they write these words the same way. They make the ayin in Shema extra large, and they make the daled extra large. And you might ask, and rightly so, why do they do that? And the answer is, we don't really know. But it's a tradition, and so they do it. When they copy the text, they copy it exactly the way they read it. And if a letter's a little bit bigger, they copy it a little bit bigger. In a few odd cases in the Torah, there's a small letter, and they copy it small. In a few cases, there's a grammatical mistake. Maybe the verb is plural and it's supposed to be singular, or feminine is supposed to be masculine. They copy it exactly the way it's supposed to be done, but sometimes they'll make a little mark to indicate that there's a mistake here. But they don't correct the mistake. They copy the mistake. So all these things are part of scribal lore, right? How the text was meticulously copied exactly over and over again. Now so we don't really know why the ayin's bigger. We don't really know why the daled is bigger. But of course, once it was done, Jews asked the question, why? And then a rabbi had to answer the question. Okay, let me tell you. And we have at least two answers that I know of. So the two answers are, first, a question of how you're supposed to pronounce the letters, how you're supposed to pronounce the words. So let me go back to the text itself again. I'll show you. So Shema, ayin, you'll notice is kind of a silent letter. It's not exactly silent. Again, language scholars say the ayin was actually supposed to be pronounced as what they call a glottal stop, which means that you close your vocal cords. You've closed the part in your neck where the sound comes out. That's a glottal stop, or at the back of your throat. So it'd sound like shma like that. Shma right? So the ayin has that kind of a sound from back there. Shma, but it's basically a silent letter. Another silent letter in the Hebrew alphabet is aleph, which is also a glottal stop, but a much less pronounced one. Echad. If you pronounce echad right before you get the vowel there's just a tiny bit of a break. Echad, as you open up your throat to make the sound. That's the sound of the aleph. So this aleph is kind of a tiny glottal stop. The ayin is a more pronounced glottal stop, but they're both basically kind of silent letters. And so the rabbi said, since we have two letters that basically have no sound, somebody might make the mistake of spelling Shema with an aleph instead of an ayin. But when you spell it with an aleph, it becomes a completely different words, and the word is Shema, which means perhaps. And you don't want to say, perhaps Israel, God is our God. Perhaps he's one. You want to say, no, listen, Israel. So they made the ayin big so that you would know that it's Shema with an ayin and not Shema or Shema with an aleph. That's one reason given. And the daled similarly is so that you don't get the wrong letter. And in this case, the daled, you'll notice you're probably starting to learn the letters. So the daled, you see, has a little bit of a thing sticking out on the right side past the upright stroke. right? That's how you distinguish a Daled from, let's say, a Resh. Let me find a Resh in here. Here, Davarim. Here's a Resh over here in Davarim, right? So the Resh has the same, looks like a Daled, except it's rounded in that corner. The Daled has the little thing sticking out, and the Resh is kind of rounded. So the Daled and the Resh can easily be confused. So they made the Daled large to make sure that you knew that it was a Daled and not a Resh. Why? Because if it's spelled with a Resh, you get Acher instead of Echad. And Acher means other. And you don't want to say, listen up, Israel, God is somebody else, something else. You want to say God is one. So you have to say Echad, and they made the Daled large. That's the first reason given for why the letters are large, so you don't get the wrong letter there. Another reason given is, and this is the more commonly explained one, Ayin and Daled are two letters that when they're put together, they spell the Hebrew word aid, which means witness. And when we recite the Shema, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, we are witnessing to our belief in the one God of the universe who created everything. And so the Ayin and Daled are made large to remind us that every time we recite this verse, we are testifying to God's uniqueness. Okay, that's enough on the first verse. After the Shema, when it's done in the prayer book, this phrase is found below it. Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. This line is added. And what it says is, blessed is his honorable, blessed is his honorable name, his holy name, or his glorious name, it's translated here. Kavod means honor or glory. So blessed is his glorious name. Malchuto comes from the word melech, which means king. Malchut means kingdom. And Malchuto, the O at the end, makes it his kingdom. So his kingdom, Leolam Va'ed, is forever and ever. So Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed translates as blessed is his glorious name, his kingdom is forever and ever. Now we recite this even though it's not in Deuteronomy, and so we don't say it out loud. If you go to a Reform synagogue, I grew up in the Reform world, and the Reform synagogues, they usually do say this out loud, but in non-Reform places, they don't say it out loud because it's not part of the original text. Why do we say it at all? Because the rabbis wanted to explain to the common Jews, that's you and me, that when we recite the Shema, we're not only attesting to God's uniqueness, but also God's sovereignty, that God is the source of authority in the universe, both in sort of the laws of physics. God is the one who established the laws of physics and is therefore the authority of how the universe runs. But God is also the moral authority for telling us how we're supposed to behave in the world, right? And so the term for an authority in the ancient world was a king, right? We don't have kings anymore, so it's a little anachronistic. But the idea is that God is the source, is the authority for the scientific and moral universe, and that kingdom is eternal, right? What morals and values are eternal. I would add to that as a modern Jew that our understanding of morals and values may develop over the centuries, right? What we consider moral and ethical today, in many ways, I hope, is superior to what our ancestors thought centuries ago. For instance, our ancestors, the people who wrote the books, were almost all men and were very male-centric, right? And that was a huge mistake, right? But that's, the society they lived in, and it's hard to transcend the world you live in. So, so we now understand morals and ethics better than our ancestors did, and hopefully in other ways as well, right? Racial differences are really genetically trivial and morally I would say inconsequential, but that's not the right word. Uh, um, they're morally indistinguishable. That's the word I want. That's the word I want. There's no moral difference in racial distinctions. And so that's something also many of our ancestors didn't realize, and unfortunately. And so in many ways, hopefully we become more advanced in our ethics. But once we come to this superior understanding of morality, we realize that these morals and values should pervade everything we do. And as far as we can tell, to the best of our ability, are the way that we should always do them, knowing that, of course, our descendants hopefully will find ways to make improvements as we did. But okay, so but that's the idea. God is the source. In any case, God is the source of that, and God is constantly, in my opinion, trying to inspire us to greater understanding of morality and ethics. Okay, so that's all kind of encapsulated in that opening line, Shema Yisrael, and the blessing that follows it, that God is the source of authority in the world. We then go to the next part of this paragraph, Ve'ahavta, you will love this name. Sometimes I don't mean to trivialize God's name, but just doing this to kind of shock us a little bit. And let's say God's name is Fred, right? We're talking to God. We're talking about God. And sometimes that's hard to get our head around. So if we use a real name, maybe that makes it a little bit easier. Fred, right? Fred, God. You should love Fred, God, our God, with all our hearts. Bechol levavcha, which is all your heart. Levav is a word for heart. Uvechol, and with all nafshecha, comes from nefesh, which means your soul. The cha ending makes it yours. These are some little grammatical tricks. Now you'll be able to understand Hebrew a little better, right? So Elohecha Elohecha makes it your God, because it has that cha ending. You should love your God, bechol levavcha, with all your heart, uvechol nafshecha, your soul, uvechol meodecha, all your ma'od. And there's a lot of discussion about what ma'od means. It means your power or your force, or perhaps some people say your money, your wealth, your property, right? With all your being, right? How do they say? All your strength or might, right? I like to think of it as with all your emotions. Nowadays, we think of the heart as the seat of emotion. Our ancestors thought that our heart was the seat of knowledge, though. They thought the heart was the brain, so to speak. Nefesh would be your life, with your whole life, or maybe your soul, your spiritual aspect. So this is maybe your intellect and emotions, your spiritual life force, and with all your power and ability that you use in the world. So in other words, with everything you have, you should love God. V'hayu hadvarim ha'ela, and these words, ela is these, dvarim are words. So with these words, asher anochi mitzavcha, the anochi is a fancy name, a fancy word for ani, which means I. It's a more ancient form of ani. So God is saying that I command you, mitzavcha from mitzvah, command you, cha. By the way, let me just stop for a second. Is it helpful to talk about the Hebrew words and letters? Does this help in the translation and make sense? Yes?
Yes,
Yes.
very much
Thank
so.
you,
Oh,
Rabbi.
good.
A lot.
Great. Okay, so that's what I'll just keep doing that then. So bechol meodecha, so with all your force. V'hayu hadvarim ha'ela, and these words that I command you hayom, today, al levavecha, there's that cha again, so they should be on your heart. And here's an interesting word, vishinantam, you should teach them, and here they say, impress them upon your children. So the translator here was trying to find an English word that would capture the meaning of this kind of learning. Lishanen, there's different words for learning in Hebrew. Lilmod is the usual word to learn, and lilamed, you take those three-letter roots, lamed, mem, daled, right? The three-letter root is lamed, mem, daled, so lilmod is to learn. If you change the vowels a little and you say lilamed, that's to teach. Right, so that's how you can play with those three-letter roots. But that's the normal word for teaching. Lishanen is to learn by repetition, by learning, by reciting it over and over and over again, so it becomes internalized as part of you. That's the idea here. You should memorize it so that it becomes part of your pattern of thinking. And that's why they translate it here as impress it. You should impress it upon your children. Ben is the Hebrew word for a son. Bat is the Hebrew word for a daughter. And as in sort of Romance languages, I learned Spanish in high school. And I imagine in many languages, again, very male-dominated cultures originally. So if there's 15 men, this is what I was told in Spanish class. If there's 15 women in a room and one man, and you want to describe all of them, you use masculine forms of the nouns and verbs, right? Because there's one man among the 15 women. If it was 15 women, you'd use the feminine plural. But once a man enters the room, you use the masculine plural. That's, a holdover from the crazy world of male-dominated cultures. And so Hebrew is the same. So the word for son is ben. The word for a daughter is bat. But if you want to say children, and there's at least one boy in the group, then you use the plural masculine. So that's banim, right? The word for daughters is banot. Banot is daughters, banim is sons. Now let's go back to the text here. I'm going through this grammar just to show you how it works. So banim, if you drop that final mem and you add cha at the end, change the vowels a little bit, and you get banecha, right? So now it's sons, and the cha ending makes it your sons. But since it includes daughters, we say your children in English, right? So you should teach them diligently to your children, banecha, uvidibartabam, and you should speak of them. This is just the word of them. Bishiftecha, shevet is to sit. Bishiftecha is in your sitting. That you're ending at the end. And bayit is the word for house. Bibayit is in the house. Bebeitecha is in your house, right? So bishiftecha bebeitecha means, and in your sitting in your house. So speak about them teach them diligently to your children, and speak about them when you're sitting in your house. Uvalechtecha, lalechet is to walk. Valechtecha is your walking, and derech is way. So when you're walking on your way, uvishachbacha, lishachav is to lie down. By the way, for those who know about the biblical phrase, when it would talk about a man lying with a woman, that's the verb that is used, lishachev, and it has that sexual connotation as well, but it doesn't have the sexual connotation here, obviously. It's just when you're lying down to go to sleep. So sometimes lying down is just lying down. And so that's what you're doing here. So when you're walking by the way, when you are lying down, uvkumecha, lakum is to get up. So when you're in your getting up. So speak about them when you lie down and when you get up. Ukshartam, lekesher is to tie them or fasten them. So you should fasten them, leot as a symbol, al yadecha. So a yad is a hand. The cha ending makes it your hand. So you should fasten them as a sign on your hand. Vahayula totafot, another kind of symbol. Bain, which means between. Ben without the yud is son. When you put a yud in there, bain, it becomes the word between. So it should be a symbol between einecha. An ayin is an eye. Einayim are eyes, and einecha are your eyes. So it's a symbol between your eyes. Uchkaftem, you should write them. Al mezuzot, doorposts. Beitecha, your house. Uvisha'arecha, a shar is a gate. And so sha'arecha are your gates. Okay, so any questions so far? I translated everything. Was it helpful to translate everything kind of word by word?
Yes, very helpful, Rabbi. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so the basic idea there is there's a lot of the essence of Judaism is encapsulated in this opening statement. there's only one God, the source of all existence, the eternal one. And we should love God with everything we have, our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions, our spirituality, and our actions in the world. And we should constantly keep this idea in our minds in everything we do, teach them diligently to our children, talk about them all the time at home and away, when we go to sleep and when we wake up. By the way, in biblical Hebrew, that we call those bookends. It's a bookend formulation, when you lie down and when you rise up. And it means everything in between, right? So the whole day long, you're supposed to think about this idea. And then to help us, remind us to think about it, there's these mnemonic devices, putting it on the doorpost of your house. So every time you leave to go out into the world, you're walking by the way, you pass the mezuzah that reminds you that there's one God and he wants us to behave in the world. And when we come home to sit in our homes, when you're sitting in your home, you pass the mezuzah as you enter the house, and you remind yourself again that God wants you to behave with your family, right? And then we actually also take this literally too, write them as a symbol on your hands. We take little strips of parchment, write these very words out on those strips of parchment, roll them up and stuff them in leather boxes, and then fix them to our arms, so that we can actually just do what it says here. You should fasten them as a symbol on your arm. It goes on your weaker arm, not the strong arm. So if you're right-handed, it goes on your left arm. If you're left-handed like me, you put it on your right arm, the box. And then you also take the same words, write them on another separate strips of parchment, roll those up and stick them in another leather box that you then wear on your forehead so that it's between your eyes, right? So these are real mnemonic devices. These boxes are called tefillin, and we wear these tefillin every morning at the morning prayer service, except on the Sabbath and festivals. So you'll only see Jews wearing them at a weekday morning service. Weekday mornings, when we recite the prayers, we put the boxes on. Shabbat morning, we don't. And the reason for that is the rabbi said that there's a verse in the Bible that says that the Sabbath itself is a symbol of our relationship with God, an oath. And therefore, on a day that is itself a symbol of our relationship, we need to wear a special box to remind us of that special relationship. So we don't wear the boxes on Sabbath and festivals when the whole day is a reminder of God's presence in our lives. So that's the tefillin, and then we also write them on mezuzot. So if you go to a Jewish home, almost every Jewish home, on the right doorpost, the entryway into the house, will be a little box where, again, we've written these words out on a piece of parchment, rolled it up and stuffed it in the box, and then fastened it to the doorposts, just like it says to do over here. In terms of your adoption of the commandments, what I would say is wait to put the mezuzah on the doorposts until you formally are converted to Judaism, so that the mezuzah will signify that the home is now officially a Jewish home. And also kind of makes it's another symbolic ritual that you do as you officially join the Jewish people, kind of thing. Just like going to the mikveh sort of makes you internally, spiritually, officially Jewish. The mezuzah on the doorpost gives notice to the world, as it were, that this home is now officially a Jewish home. Wearing tefillin, we will be doing this normally we do this on a February Sunday in February, the day of the Super Bowl. I don't know if they're going to have a Super Bowl this year, but and I don't know what's going to be like this year, so it may not happen this year. But on a normal February Super Bowl Sunday, there became a tradition in the conservative movement that particularly men who liked the Super Bowl would get together for morning services before the Super Bowl to put on tefillin, and it became a thing. And now we've made it egalitarian, so women can also put on tefillin. We also encourage women to put on tefillin. And if you'd like to do that and try, and I don't know if we'll be doing it this year, but certainly next year, you'll have an opportunity to practice putting on tefillin. There's a particular way they're wrapped around your arms, and you can practice that. Normally, we teach, again, in the old world, it was only a boy's mitzvah. Nowadays, our movement encourages women also, girls and women, to wear tefillin also. And in the old days, it would be before the boy or girl wouldn't wear it until their bar mitzvah, until they are commanded. So at the age of 13, the boy becomes commanded, and that's when he would start wearing tefillin. Usually in the Orthodox world, you start teaching the boy about a month before his bar mitzvah or the week before his bar mitzvah, so he can practice putting the tefillin on, so that by the time of his bar mitzvah, he's used to it already. So again, you don't have to wear tefillin until you are commanded, but I would encourage you to practice it on Super Bowl Sunday if we're doing it this year, or if not, practice it a few times so that when you're officially Jewish, you'll be ready to do it easily. So that's about the tefillin. Okay, we talked about the mezuzah. I think that's about it for that. Okay, what comes next is the second paragraph of the Shema, which is a different chapter of Deuteronomy, chapter 11. And this is the chapter that I mentioned in my talk about reward and punishment, because it's one of those passages in Deuteronomy that talks about if you follow God's commandments, then God will bring the rain in its season, and your crops will grow, and you'll be successful, and you'll have enough to provide your family. But if you don't follow God's commandments, then the rains won't come, and the land will dry up, and you'll starve, and you'll have to leave. Right, and so that is not necessarily the world as we see it. That is to say, there are plenty of righteous people who don't live such a comfortable life, and we unfortunately know of many people who do not so nice things and seem to get away with it and are never punished, or not sufficiently punished in our minds for the things they do in this world. So so this idea of reward and punishment doesn't necessarily fit our world, but that's a topic I talked about in my other lecture, so I won't dwell on it here. Since this particular paragraph is part of our liturgy, and we are supposed to recite it twice a day, one of my teachers gave me one way to understand this passage that modern people can hopefully find meaningful. So for those of you who accept the 97% of climate scientists who tell us that there is in fact climate change and that it's going to mess with the rain, it's raining right now, of course, that's probably normal rain, but over the long term, we're going to get heavier, more devastating rains in some places and more devastating droughts in other places because of climate change. That's what they're telling us. As I'm just saying, if you don't agree with that, I'm not here to try and convince you of that. I will say that 97% of climate scientists tell us this is happening in the world. But that notwithstanding, if you accept this idea, then this paragraph of the Shema will resonate with you, I think, in some ways, because it's telling one of the things God wants us to do is to take care of the planet, to find ways to deal with the rain not coming in its season, to find ways to store water for times of drought, and to channel water in times of flood so it doesn't cause as much destruction. And so if we do what we're supposed to do, our part in taking care of the planet, which God has instructed us to do, we will still be able to prosper and succeed in the world. If we don't do what God wants us to do, we don't use our intelligence and resources and insights and creativity to fix the planet, we will have to deal with the consequences of that. So in that sense, if you accept that idea, this is one way to understand this paragraph that has real meaning for us today. But in any case, that is part of what's being said here. It's the main thrust of this part of the paragraph is to tell us that we really should do what God wants us to do, which is to be good in the world. And then the reason, in my opinion, this is included in the Shema is because of the second half of the paragraph, where it repeats these mnemonic devices. Therefore, impress my words upon your very heart, right? This now sounds like that first paragraph of Deuteronomy. Bind them as a sign in your hand. Let them serve as a symbol on your forehead. Teach them to your children, reciting them when you're at home and away, when you lie down and when you wake up, and write them on the doorposts of your house, on your gates. Right, so all of this is very much the same as the first paragraph, which is the real reason I think this is included in this part of the prayers, because it resonates with what we said before. To the end that your children may endure in the land that God swore to your fathers as a sign to them, as long as there is a heaven on earth. That's the second paragraph. And then comes the third paragraph, which is, again, a mnemonic device, but now a new one. So here it says, the Lord spoke to Moses, or Yud-He, Vav-He, God's eternalness, right? The eternal one said to Moses, speak to the Israelite people and instruct them to make fringes on the corners of their garments throughout the ages, and let them attach a cord of blue to the fringe at each corner. And that you will look at the fringe and you will recall all the commandments that God gave us to observe them, and you won't stray after your heart and your eyes and lustful urges. And thus you shall be reminded to observe all of God's commandments and be holy to God. I am the Lord your God who took you out of Egypt to be your God. I, the Lord, am your God. Or I, the Eternal One, am your God. Right, so here's another mnemonic device about putting fringes on the corners of your garments. And this is the prayer shawl, called a talit, T-A-L-L-I-T. It's a four-cornered garment. It has to have four corners, and any four-cornered garment, you're supposed to put fringes on the corners. Now, if you've seen Jews wearing these four-cornered garments, you'll see many of them are beautifully decorated in different colors now. The colors don't matter, and so artists have become very creative. They used to be kind of just white with maybe black stripes or blue stripes, but now the color is not important. So many colors and beautiful talitot have been created in recent decades by artists. And it can be made out of wool, it can be made out of cotton, or an artificial material. And you'll also notice that sometimes there's fancy knots, fringes tied along the hems, along the sides of the four-cornered garments, right? There's also a four-sided garment. It has four corners, it has four sides. And sometimes you'll see knots tied along the sides. Those are not the ritual knots. Those are just decorative knots. The real, ritual knots are the ones that are tied through a hole in the corner of the garment, and there's special strings that are attached and tied in a special pattern, 5 knots and several windings of strings. Those are the official fringes that are commanded. Now, you may notice that on many of the talitot that men wear, and women are now encouraged to wear as well in our movement, they're all white threads in the corners. There's no blue thread. It says to put a thread of blue, but there isn't one in most talitot today. The reason for that is because, we're a religion of rules. The thread of blue was supposed to come from a particular kind of dye. The dye was coming from a particular mollusk, a snail, that was found in the Mediterranean Sea. And they would exude this kind of inky substance that would make a blue dye in garments. And the story is that at some point we forgot which mollusk made the blue dye. We lost track of it. And so rather than get the wrong color blue or make the blue the wrong way, we decided not to color it at all. And so the threads are all white. The turn of the 20th century, a Jewish scholar, Herzog, did a whole research study of it. He was a chemist, I think he was a chemist, and he studied this blue thread and the sources and the traditions, and he claims to have recovered the original snail that was used to make this blue dye, and it's the Murex snail, Murex trunculus snail, if you're interested in looking it up. And it makes this beautiful blue dye. It also happens to be the color that the Europeans loved, European royalty loved, because it was so precious. It took a lot of snails to create enough dye to dye a garment to make it blue, this color. And so it became very precious. And the royalty in Europe loved to wear garments made of this color. And that's how it came to be known as royal blue.
Mm.
And by the way, if you've heard of royal purple, that's because the same snail using the same dye can make a purple colored garment depending on how long the garment is cured before it's finished. So it either makes a purple color or a blue color. And that's why royal purple and royal blue both come originally from this Murex trunculus snail. That blue was the one
This
used
one
to
here.
make. You find it? There it is. Yep, royal blue and royal purple. Perfect.
Mm.
That was the blue. So based on this analysis, there is now a company in Israel called Patil Techelet. Techelet is that color blue in Hebrew, and Patil means thread. So there's a company in Israel called Patil Techelet, the thread of blue, that now makes this dye from the trunculus snail. And you can order a set of strings from them, cut off the strings that were on your prefab talit, and if you learn how to tie them, you can tie new strings on. And there are websites that tell you how to wind the strings to make the knots and so on. And there's a few variations of custom of how you're supposed to tie the knots. So anyway, my son did that. He read the book, was very impressed. We ordered a bunch of sets, and then we practiced putting them on some talitot. Okay, so that's enough for that. We're almost done with our time here. That's the, oh, okay, let me tell you a racy story. Why not, right? It's Sunday morning. So, so the fringes are supposed to remind you of God's commandments, and there's this odd expression. Let me just point to it in the Hebrew here, actually, before I tell you the story. So it's translated here, don't follow your heart and your eyes and your lustful urge, right? So the translator wanted to capture this idea of lustful. Why was that? Because in the Hebrew it says, velo taturu, and you should not stray after or wander, acharei levavchem. Chem is the yawls. It's the name for saying yawls in Hebrew. Right? In Texan, we can say yawls, the plural of your. So not stray after y'all's hearts and after y'all's eyes, right? You're all acharei einechem, and straying after all y'all's eyes. Asher atem, that you, and here's the key word, zonim achareihem. This achareihem means after them. So the question is, what does zonim mean? The Hebrew word zonah is the Hebrew word for a prostitute. And so it's saying that you're not supposed to stray after what your eyes and your heart's desire and so on, as if to prostitute yourself after them, right? That's, so they wanted to capture that idea in this translation. So based on this unusual word, right, that's a pretty graphic word to use in a biblical text. So the rabbis asked the question, why did God use that word? And they made up a story. I'm assuming it's made up. And the story is, it's in the Talmud. The story is there was a nice yeshiva boy, a boy who was studying in the religious school from his rabbi to follow all of God's laws. But he is, becomes a teenager, and he has certain desires. And in those days, of course, he couldn't do anything in his community because he'd be discovered, right? Now we have the internet, you can do anything at home, but in those days they didn't have that. And so he, I guess this prostitute was well known in this other town. She had a reputation. He saved up some money. This is what's told the Talmud. I didn't make this story up. He went to visit her, and he gives her the money. And she invites him into the room, and she's up in they describe this room as being a very fancy room with this fancy bed and whatever. And he starts to take off his clothes. And as he's taking off his clothes, his talit slaps him in the face. The fringes slap him in the face. And he suddenly realizes that what he's doing is not appropriate. And he tells the woman, I'm sorry, I cannot do this. And she is offended, right? What, I'm not beautiful enough for you? And he says, no, it's not about you. I just can't do this. And so he leaves. And she is so impressed with this young man that she follows him all the way back to his town and into his yeshiva, into his school, religious schoolhouse. I'm not making this up. This is a story that's in the Talmud. And she asks about this guy, and the teacher says, oh, yes, this gentleman is here and whatever. And the end of the story is they get married. She converts to Judaism, and they get married. And the idea is, of course, I'm sure, by the way, that the movie Pretty Woman was based on this Talmudic story. I'm sure they told the plot line for that. But in any case, that's the story told in Talmud. And the reason they tell that story is because the unusual word zonim achareihem, right? This kid thought he was going to prostitute, stray after what his eyes, was desired. And the tzitzit reminded him not to do it. Okay, now I got to tell you a racy story on a Sunday morning. Okay, let's get back to business here. Get our minds out of that. Okay. Here's some, I might have left out some of this. I kind of tried to remember most of these notes here, but if not, you can read the notes, and if I miss something, ask me about it. Second paragraph is about reward and punishment, and the third is about God's redemption, because it talks about God taking us out of Egypt, right? It starts with the mnemonic device of wearing fringes, but then it reminds us that God took us out of Egypt, and that is that God is not just the God of the universe, but that God plays a role in history and helping human beings to improve. I just want to spend the last 3 minutes that I have looking at the blessings that come before and after. So this is from the prayer book in the evening. The prayer before, the first blessing before the Shema in the evening is about God's creation. And it focuses, because it's in the evening, it focuses on evening, right? Praised are you, Adonai, our God, whose word brings on the evening dusk. You open the gates of dawn. This is sort of ancient scientific understanding of the world, right? The sun traveled around the earth. It enters from a chamber in the east, travels across the sky, and then goes back home through a gate in the west, travels underground overnight, and comes back up in the east. So we don't believe that anymore. It's just a metaphor. Just take it as a metaphor. God makes the earth spin, right? So that we have night and day. But it's poetically described as God opens the gates of dawn with wisdom and changes the day's divisions with understanding. It's a succession of the seasons, right? So the stars in the sky change, the constellations change during the course of the year that indicate the different seasons. You create day and night, rolling light away from darkness, darkness from light. And it's just reminding us of the beauty of God's creation, the magnificence and intricacy, and sort of how everything works so smoothly together in the natural world that God created. This is a blessing that praises God for such a beautiful creation. That's the first blessing. The second one then talks about how God loves us. And God loves us so much, he gave us laws to follow. The Torah, right, which are the commandments. This, I think, may be seen as an answer to Paul, who in Christianity sort of saw the law as a stumbling block to being good. I don't understand exactly Paul's logic, but he saw the first covenant, the Old Testament, the old covenant that the Jews had with God based on law and a rigidity of God's demanding, commanding presence. And the new covenant is one of love and, and so on. And the Jewish view is that they are not opposites, that law and love are just two sides of the same coin. God loves us so much, he gave us the law. Much like a parent has to teach their children to look both ways before they cross the street, or not to touch a hot stove, or how to behave nicely with their siblings and their classmates, to respect their teachers and their elders, right? We have to train our kids to be good. God gave us laws to train us to be good, right? That was God showing God's love for us. God loved us so much, he cared about us so much, that he wanted us to be good people. So he gave us these laws to follow. And then what happens is, this is a beautiful mirror image to then the first paragraph of the Shema, which tells us we in turn should love God back with all our heart, all our soul, and all our strength. And how do we love God? By following God's laws, right? God gave us the laws out of love to teach us to be good. And we in response show our love for God by doing what God wants us to do in this world. And so then we have the 3 paragraphs of the Shema, and then the blessing after the Shema talks about God's deliverance. Remember, the 3rd paragraph ended with God taking us out of Egypt. So based on that theme, the blessing after the Shema reminds us of God's presence in history, and especially the Exodus from Egypt, and singing Mi Chamocha Ba'elim Adonai, who is like you, God amongst the mighty, which is the song that our ancestors sang when they were finally free from the Egyptians, when the Egyptian army was destroyed, so they could no longer be recaptured and brought back as slaves. So that moment of final freedom was this, when we were standing on the other side of the Red Sea and the Egyptians could no longer harm us, right? And we can imagine for freed slaves how powerful a moment that was. And that's when we said, wow, this God is really pretty amazing. And that became the paradigm for seeing God's role in history. So, so the blessing after the Shema discusses that. And then in the evening, there's a second blessing added, which asks God to help us lie down at peace at night and awaken us to life renewed in the morning. In the morning, which I don't have time to do, I only have like 30 seconds. I'm running overtime now. The morning blessings follow the same pattern. The first blessing before the Shema talks about God's creation, but since it's in the morning, it talks mostly about God creating light, because the sun just came up. And then it waxes poetic because it's the morning and we have a little more time. We're not anxious to get home and get to sleep or have dinner or whatever. We have a little time. We're not anxious to get to work right away. So there were more poems written for the morning blessing about how magnificent God's creation is in the morning with the light. And even the angels are singing God's blessings at creation and dawn. And then the second paragraph again talks about God's love for us. He loves us so much, he gave us the Torah, and we in turn should love God. And then the blessing after the Shema again talks about God taking us out of Egypt, ending with Mi Chamocha. So now we've covered the Shema and its blessings as a unit. Hopefully that makes a little more sense. And I wish you all a wonderful day.
Good job, Steve.
Okay, now I have to leave and go to the other class. I will, let me copy this long comment here from Terry.
Thank you, Rabbi Morgan.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Okay, anyway, so if you want to, if you missed some of it, you can catch the rest of it when it's posted on the video. All right, take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Shalom. How is everyone? Happy Hanukkah.
Shalom.
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 Hanukkah.
Hag Hanukkah Sameach.
Big Hanukkah.
Oops, somebody's entering. Admit. So, Manishma.
Baruch Hashem.
Baruch Hashem. We have
Baruch
a
Hashem.
Todah, Baruch Hashem. Maybe a kacha. Yeah, a few more people coming in. Did people watch the candle lighting? There were so many candle lightings online. Did people follow any of those? No, there's a really great youth choir that I volunteer with sometimes, do things for them sometimes, called Hazamir. It's a national choir. And they have online candle lighting this week. So I love hearing them sing. Okay. Okay. All right. Okay. So Ani Tehillah. Ani Tehillah. If I could point at you, I could ask you who you are, but I can't. I have to say your name to do it, but I might do it anyway. Okay. Sarah, mi'at.
I'm sorry, I missed a few classes, so I'm catching up.
Oh, okay.
I'll listen to
Ani.
everybody first and then.
Oh, okay, but that's okay. I'm going to show you right now. Ani means I,
Hi.
also mean I am. So Ani Tehillah, that's my Hebrew name, Tehillah. I am Tehillah. So now I'm asking you what your name is. And all you need to say is Ani
Sarah.
Metsuyan. Okay. Rinat. This is so silly because I'm saying your name, but I'm going to do it anyway. Rinat. Mi'at.
Ani Rinat.
Na'im me'od. That means nice to meet you. Na'im me'od. Okay. Linda. Mi'at.
Ani Leah.
At Leah. Yafeh. Lovely. Okay. Nicole. Mi'at.
Me, Nicole.
Metziyan. Na'im me'od. Dana. Mi'at. Oh, I'm sorry. I put you on the spot. Never mind. That's okay. Okay. Lizette. Mi'at.
Naim Lisette.
Ani Lizette. Metziyan. Oh, let's see. I guess I can only ask people who aren't muted. Sarah. Mi'at.
Ani Sarah.
Are both Sarahs the same Sarah? Like both screens that say Sarah or Sarah? No, I can't tell. I have two screens that say Sarah. Okay.
Well, I don't know. I'm only on this one. I don't know.
Okay. Cosette, am I saying your name right? I always forget. Cosette?
Yes.
Mi'at.
Cosette.
Okay, so you would just say Ani Cosette.
Ani Cosette. Okay.
Na'im
I missed
me'od.
last week.
Excuse me?
I missed last week. So.
Oh, this might even be from a few weeks ago. I'm sorry, I should have reviewed this earlier. Esther. Mi'at.
Ani Esther.
Na'im me'od. That means like nice to meet you. Na'im me'od.
Can I ask a question, Cantor?
Yes.
Last week I missed last week. I was out of the country, and the last week before this with the Rabbi Morgan, the class was. I waited for like an hour and never showed up. I don't know if later on he came on or if you came on.
I think we didn't have class Thanksgiving weekend.
No, before then.
I don't know. We didn't miss any other classes that I can think of.
Okay. I need
I'm
to
not
check my
exactly,
dates.
there might have been a technical issue.
Maybe so. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So I'm sad that you missed. Is there anyone else who wants to practice?
We do.
Okay. So is that Stephanie?
Yes.
Stephanie. Mi'at.
Ani Stephanie.
Na'im me'od. Okay. Thank you. Good job. All right.
I am also here too.
Oh, okay. Okay. Adam, mi'ata.
That is
Miat Adam.
No.
No.
Ani.
Ani Adam.
Right. So
Oh,
I'm glad
I wanted to go and I still didn't get it.
I'm glad this came up because you'll see that we don't have an equal gender spread in the class, right? So this doesn't come up as often as it should. First person is just one is both genders. So ani means I or I am, and anachnu means we, or it can mean we are, right? For men or for women. It doesn't matter if we're men or women. When we say ani, it can be a man or a woman. And when we say anachnu, we, it could be a man or a woman. And I think this is the same in like Spanish and Italian and Romance languages. I think it's the same in other Romance language. Not that Hebrew's a Romance language, but in second and third person, there's the male form and the female form. So at is when you're talking directly to a woman, and ata is when you're talking directly to a man, right? Ata is you are, or it can be you when you're talking to a man. And because Hebrew prayers are a bit, I don't want to use the word sexist, but let's just say ancient, and therefore not recognizing the nature of God in the same way that we might recognize God now, right? Our ancient concept of God was a male concept. And so we would pray, Baruch atah Adonai. Blessed are you, Adonai. We didn't say at when we were talking to God. We said atah, which is the male second person. Atah, you, for a man. Baruch atah Adonai. So if you look in some contemporary Sidurim, they kind of go back and forth with the pronouns, trying to find the right fit. So even though we know that, in fact, God is not male or female, but something much more transcendent than gender. But anyway, it's an interesting point. Okay, let's do our Aleph Bet song because we really have a long time. So if we turn to page 95. Okay. I'll lead the first time, and then I'd love to have a volunteer to lead the second time. Aleph, bet, vet.
Aleph, bet, vet.
Gimel, dalet, hey.
Gimel, dalet, hey.
Vav, zayin, chet, tet.
Vav, zayin, het, tet.
Yod, kaf, chav.
Yud, Kaf,
Lamed, mem, nun.
Lamed, Mem, Nun.
Samech, ayin, pei, fei.
Samech, ayin, pei.
Sadi, kuf, resh.
Sadi, kuf, resh.
Shin, sin, av.
Shin, sin, av.
Okay, can we have somebody lead this? A volunteer, maybe somebody who hasn't led before.
I can lead it.
Oh, that's great. Thank you, Adam. Go ahead.
Aleph, bet, vet.
Aleph, bet, vet.
Gimel, dalet, hey.
Gimel, dalet, hey.
Vav, zayin, het, tet.
Vav, zayin, het, tet.
Yud, kaf, chaf.
Yod, kaf, chaf.
Lamed, mem, nun.
Lamed, mem, nun.
Samech, ayin, pei, fei.
Samech, ayin, pei, fei.
Sadi, kuf, resh.
Sadi, kuf, resh.
Din, sin, av.
Sin, av. Oh, very good. Kol hakavod. That was very nice. Okay. I am just curious if there's anybody who could just like look at our Aleph Bet chart and chant it straight through. Is there anybody who could look at it and go Aleph, Bet, Vet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, like that? Is there anyone that can do that without the singing?
Haven't correct.
Can you guys, I don't mean to say you guys, that's very Philadelphia, calling everyone you guys. But I'm from Philadelphia. So can you folks try that this week? Practice reading the Aleph Bet without the song and just see if you can. And what would be even more amazing is if you could do it backwards. Tav, Sin, Shin, Resh, Kuf, Tzadi, like that. Let's try doing it forwards. Because when you could do it backwards, that makes your mind hurt. And when your mind hurts, that means you're learning. If your mind doesn't ache a little bit, you're probably not learning. Okay. Let's see. I'm trying to remember. Are we on chapter 10 this week? I'm trying to remember. Are we on Navi? Did we do Shema?
No, I mean, I don't know. I missed.
I thought we're on 7.
I think we're on 7.
Oh, I
Page
guess
30.
I'm overly
Page 30.
ambitious for us. Sorry.
What page?
You're on page 30.
Okay.
Oh, so somebody's asking about the Hanukkah Express. They are doing it today because of the rain. I'm really not sure how it works. I really apologize for that. So I wish I could give you more information. Okay. All right. Here we go. So we're on page 7. One of my favorite words, tzedakah. And can everybody say tzedakah?
Tzedakah.
Right. And when I was a little girl going to Hebrew school, they had like a little candy store set up for us after school. You went to Hebrew school and there was a little candy store for the students. But before you were allowed to buy candy, you had to put some money in the tzedakah box, right? Which was probably a Jewish National Fund box. It was probably a little blue and white cardboard box that they probably had there for us to put our coins in. And a lot of families have a tzedakah box right next to their Shabbat candles. And so every week before you say your candle blessings for Shabbat, you can put some money in the tzedakah box. And after it's full, you can find something meaningful to give your money to. You'll notice that the translation here is justice, tzedakah, justice, and that is the correct translation of this word. Because tzedakah is making things more just or more fair, right? It's like economic justice, right? That people who have a little bit more can share what they have with people who have a little bit less, and that thing makes things more fair. So we don't like to call tzedakah charity, because charity is something that you might do to be nice. And in Judaism, it's a mitzvah, a commandment to give tzedakah in order to make the world a more fair place. So we don't like to say charity, we like to say tzedakah because it's the right thing to do. It's not just something you do when you're feeling kind. So, although it might make you feel really good to give tzedakah. Okay, so tzedakah, there are other forms of the word like tzedek is another form of the word justice. Okay, so let's just hear that one more time. Tzedakah.
Tzedakah.
Right. Okay. So there are two letters, right? There's the kuf that sounds like a K. The tsadi, which to me sounds like a TS. Like imagine a word that ends with TS, like bats, bats. Do you hear the consonant sounds at the end of the word bats? That is a tsadi, bats, bats. Okay, people have trouble with this particular word. Okay, I'm trying to think, cats, bats, cats, something like that. It's in English, I can't think of any word in English where that sound begins the word. I can only think of that at the end of words. Okay, so let's review our consonants on the top of 7. Bet, tav, tav, shin, mem, lamed, kaf, hey, resh, kaf, vet, dalid, aleph, vav. Okay, I'm going to do that one more time. And if you need to write anything in when I'm going through it, I encourage you to do so. Bet, tav, tav, shin, mem, lamed, kaf, hey, resh, kaf, vet, dalid, aleph, vav. Okay, so what 2 letters have we learned that sounds like a V? We've learned 2 letters that sound like a V. What are they?
Vet and Vav.
Good, vet and vav. Vet and vav. Okay, now I'm going to do the alphabet again. I'll do 2 letters and you do the next 2 letters. Bet, tav,
Tav,
Shin,
mem, lamed,
Kaf,
Hey,
resh, chaf,
Bet,
Bet,
Dalet,
aleph, vav. Now you do the first 2, please.
Bet,
Tav,
Tav, shin,
Mem, Dalet,
kaf, hey,
Resh, Ka,
vet, dalet.
Aleph, Vav.
Okay, now I'm going to make it a lot weirder and harder because we're going to go backwards. So I'm going to do vav, aleph, and you'll do dalet, vet, and we'll go backwards, okay? Vav, aleph,
Dalet, Vet,
chaf, resh,
Hey, Vav,
lamed, mem,
Shin, Tav,
tav, bet. Okay. Can you tell me, are there any letters that you might confuse with bet because they look a little bit like bet?
Bet and Kaf.
Yes, I would agree. Vet and kaf. Vet and kaf. What about the letter resh? Are there any letters that you might confuse with the letter resh?
Dalit.
Yes, and somebody said vav, right? Dalit and vav. Believe it or not, vav, if it's all by itself and it's not right next to the resh, some people do confuse vav, which is like a really, really skinny resh, right? So people do confuse those two. And I've even had people who confuse lamed with resh, because when resh is written with a really fancy font and it has more of a serif thing at the top, it can look, it still doesn't look like lamed, but it looks a little more like, so people make that mistake sometimes. And what might you possibly confuse with a tav? Did someone say hey? Hey would be correct. Hey is correct. People do, and you can see that if you were in a hurry, you might confuse a tav, especially the one that doesn't have a dot, a dagesh. You could confuse that with a hey, right? Tav, we said, has a toe, and hey has a little hole. See that little vent it has at the top? Hey has a hole. Okay. Good. Let's do some reading at the bottom of the page. We're going to practice kuf, the letter kuf. Okay. I will read line 1 by myself, and then we'll come back and you can read it with me. Ka, ke, kuf, ka, ke, ka. Will you read it with me now? Ka, ke, kuf, ka, ke, ka. Okay, I'll read line 2. Ha, ra, ke, ve. And now read it with me, please. Line 2. Ha, ra, ke, ve. What 2 letters on line 2 sound the same?
Kaf and the kuf.
Correct. Kaf and kuf. Kaf and kuf sound the same. So fortunately, we don't have to spell Hebrew. We just have to be able to read Hebrew, because there are several sound-alike letters. And just like English can be confusing that way, Hebrew for sure can be confusing that way. Okay, line 3. I will read it and then you read it with me. Ka, ke, ha, ah.
What?
No,
Where is she?
I don't know.
Okay. So will you read with me? Line 3. Ka, ke, ha, ke, ha, ah. Line 4, I'll read it first. Kav, rak. Wait till I'm done. I'll read line 4 first. Kav, rak, kara, ba. Okay, with me, please. Kav, rak, kara, ba. Good. Bak. Great. And 5. I'll read it first. Kerav, rakad, daka, shaka. I'm going to read that again by myself, and if you need to write anything in, feel free. Kerav, rakad, daka, shakal. Okay, try reading with me. Kerav, rakad, daka, shakal. Good, very good. Okay, top of 31. I want to repeat just for a second what I said before, because it's really true. I was just watching a video with, I think his name is Daniel Huberman, and he's the head of neurobiology at Stanford University. And he said that when you're learning and you're creating like new synapses, your brain secretes a hormone, that has that has the effect of making you feel a bit anxious. So when you're learning and you feel a bit anxious, you might run away. You might want to run away or close the book. But if you kind of push your way through it, you're really learning. You're at kind of maximum learning when your brain has that anxious feeling. So just to say that that's not a bad symptom, okay? So, all right. Top of 31. Describe the shape of the tzadi. I'm a little bit stumped at how to describe it.
Tzadi.
Looks like a
Tzadi.
backwards.
It looks a little like a backwards Y. To me, it looks like the before and after position of doing a crunch. You know, like when you're doing a crunch and you're back and then you go forward. That's kind of what it looks like to me. I don't know. Whatever works for you for recognizing it. But I can see, you know, there are my legs straight out on the floor and I'm back and then I move forward. It's my crunch. Anyway, okay. So Tzadi, and it says tzedakah. Okay, I'm going to read line 1, and then you'll read it after me, and write in anything you need to write in. Okay. Sa se sa tzadi sa se. Okay, read it with me. Sa se sa tzadi sa se. Good. Line 2. I'll read it and then you read it with me after that. Ha sa he he se le. Okay, I'm going to go back and read it again. With me, please. Ha he se le. Good. Line 3. Sa se ka ke de. Okay. Let's read it together. Sa se ka ke de. Good. Okay. Line 4 is a little harder, right? Because it's 2 consonants instead of 1. So if you need to write anything in to help you, that's okay. I also want to remind you, if a shva, what's a shva? Does anybody remember what a shva is? Okay, a shva is that vowel that's 2 vertical dots. That's a shva. If a shva is at the beginning of a word, it has a sound, eh. But if it's at the end of a syllable or the end of a word, it's silent, okay?
Cantor?
Yes.
So the way that we've been looking at it is that it's if we were to write it out in transliteration style, it would be like an apostrophe. Is that correct, or should we not think of it that way?
I've seen transliterations that use an apostrophe for a shva, but they usually do that for a shva that you would pronounce. Like, for example, the word tzedakah, they might transliterate it T-S apostrophe D-A-K-A-H. Or they might just transliterate it T-S-E-D-A-K-H. Right? So I've seen it both ways. I try to keep things simple by just transliterating because I think it's simpler, but it's not wrong. But when the shva is silent, it's not usually transliterated. Okay. Not even with an apostrophe. It's only when you're pronouncing if you see a transliterated word with an apostrophe, that means that there is a shva that should be pronounced, right? Like in the word veshamru, right? Veshamru, right? You pronounce ve at the beginning, even though it's vav with a shava underneath. Okay. Was that enough of an answer?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to read line 4. And I'm just saying that if the shva is at the beginning, I pronounce it. And if it's at the end, I don't. Tsar, ratsa, veka, bak. With me, please. Tsar, ratsa, veka, bak.
Bekar. Bak.
Good. Okay, line 5. In the first word on line 5, am I going to pronounce the shva or is it silent?
Silent.
Silent.
It's silent. That's correct. And why is it silent?
The end.
Because it's at
Because
the
it's
end
at
of the
the
word.
end.
That's right. Okay. Kashar, kasar, besad, rata. Read with me. Kashar,
Shar.
kasar,
Sar.
besad,
Sar.
rata.
Rats.
Let me read that last word for you again. Rats, ta. Rats,
Rats.
it's 2 syllables, and the first syllable is rats, and the second syllable is ta. Rats.
Sa.
Good. Okay. And why is the shava in the word rats, ta? Why is it silent?
The end of the syllable.
It's at the end of a syllable, right? And usually when you see a single shava in the middle of the word, that's because it's at the end of a syllable. Right, very good. Okay, so now here we go, at the bottom of the page. In modern Hebrew, vav at the beginning of a word means ve. So draw a kav, excuse me, draw a line from each Hebrew phrase to its matching picture. I think it's hard considering how tiny these pictures are. Look to see if there is a rak, one item, only one item, or if there is one item and a second item. So ve means and. Ve means and. So our first words are Kala Veshabat. Who knows what Kala Veshabat means?
Lord of Sabbath.
Bride and Shabbat.
Yes, bride and Shabbat. Okay, our next word is, so they drew a kav, a line is a kav. They drew a line to the Kala and a line to Shabbat. Okay, matzah. What is matzah?
The bread.
Unleavened bread.
Passover bread.
Right, unleavened, dry, and unappetizing bread. I happen to know, strangely enough, people who love matzah.
I do. I do. I like it.
Okay, so can you find the tmuna, the picture for matzah?
Has to be the
one in the bottom, the second one.
Yes, the second one from the bottom. Okay, so you need to draw a kav from matzah to the tmuna, the picture of matzah. Okay, next one, rak havdalah. So if you look at the paragraph above, tell me what is rak? What does
Only.
rak mean?
Only.
The line.
Only.
Only.
Right. So only Havdalah. So which picture shows what we use for Havdalah?
The last one.
Bottom.
Right, the
bottom.
bottom picture, right? Havdalah, right, is the service that we have at the end of Shabbat. It means separation. We're separating between the holiness of Shabbat and the rest of the week. And so in the picture, you can see the candles, the spices, and the wine. Rak Havdalah, just Havdalah, or only Havdalah. Now, Havdalah ve Shabbat. Havdalah ve Shabbat.
Havdalah and Shabbat.
Right, Havdalah and Shabbat. So you need to not write just one kav, but then you have to do a second kav, because you have to draw a kav from the words to Shabbat, and you have to draw a line from the words to Havdalah. So there's two lines for that one, right? Which picture do we use for Shabbat?
The third one.
Third one.
Right, with the Neirot, with the candles. Okay, and then the bottom one, Rak Tzedakah. What does that mean? Rak Tzedakah.
Only Zadaka.
Only Tzedakah.
The first one.
It's the first one. And what did we say that's a picture of?
That's this, or a box for giving.
Right, right. We call it a tzedakah box, right? A tzedakah box, right? We put a little coin in the box. Okay.
Diane, I'm a little bit confused where, that it's only, rock is only.
Oh, they just want to teach you the word rock. So you're not going to draw two lines like to a tzedakah box and some candles. They just want you to draw one line to tzedakah. And they're just practicing using the word rak only, and they're contrasting that with ve, which means and, right? So rak is like one thing, and ve tells you there's more than one thing.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess it wasn't super clear, but that was the intention of the teacher who wrote that exercise. Okay. On page 32, I'd like to give you a little bit of homework, but it's not mandatory homework. Like, you're not going to flunk the class if you don't do it. But I'd like to ask that using all your various charts that I've sent you, or the book itself, I'd like you to try to transliterate 3 lines of this exercise for next week. Do you know what I mean by transliterate? So let me give you an example. Like on line 4, the first word on line 4, that's Sadi, Vet, Aleph. So the way I would transliterate that, and there's no one way of doing it, is I would spell it T-S for Sadi. So it'd be T-S-A, V-A, and Aleph is silent, so I wouldn't put anything else. Maybe I wouldn't put anything else. It's T-S-A-V-A. That's how I would do it. You could do it differently, but that would be Sava. Sava. That's how I would transliterate it. So any 3 lines on page 32, if you would transliterate it, and then you could like take a picture with your camera and just text it to me. And I'm just gonna, I know I've given you this before, but let me give you my phone number and email address again.
What did I do with the other pair?
So I just sent it in chat, my email address and phone number for anybody that doesn't already have it. So I'd like to go to page 33. Okay, so the exercise on the top of page 33. See the circled example. So I guess they want you to put a circle around words where the Shema is silent. They want you to put a circle around words where the Shema is silent, and we're not going to worry about the rectangles. We're just looking at the circles. Now, in this, it says that the Shema at the beginning of a word is pronounced like an But, you know, when I was studying in Israel, and my professor was from Hebrew University, which is supposed to be the best Hebrew program. And my teachers from Hebrew University said that we should pronounce it like an I or an eh, definitely not like an That's more of an American sound. So the first word is tzedakah, right? It's not tzedakah, right? That's not good Hebrew. Anyway, we said that if a shva is at the beginning of a word, it's pronounced. And if there's a single shva in the middle or the end of a word, it's silent. So I just want you to circle the words that have a silent shva, right? If a shva is at the middle or the end of a word, a single shva in the middle or the end of a word, it's silent. So can you just take a few moments to take a look at these words? Okay, how did it go? Success?
Yes.
No comment.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, here we go. All right. So on the first line, which words are circled on the first line? Is the second word circled?
Yes.
Yes.
Is the third word circled?
No.
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 Is the fourth word circled?
Yes.
Yes.
Good. Okay. On line 2, we already know about the first word. Is the second word circled?
Yeah.
Yes.
Is the third word circled?
No.
Is the fourth word circled?
No.
Good for you. Okay. Line 3. Is the first word circled?
No.
Is the second word circled?
No.
Is the third word circled?
Yes.
Is the last word circled?
No.
Good. Okay. I'm glad you got it. Okay. And then the last thing we can do is the bottom of 33. So I'd like you to, for each of these Hebrew letters, I'd like you to say the name of the letter, or you can just write the name of the letter. and then circle the letter in English that corresponds to it. So for example, the first letter that we see is hey. And what letter in English corresponds to hey?
H.
H.
H. Okay. So go ahead, try to fill this in. You might want to like thumb back in your book or go back this way. At the beginning of the class, I mean, a couple of months ago, I sent you an alphabet chart that has the names of all the letters written in. So if you need to consult that, you certainly can.
Cantor, the top that we did, line 3, the last word, we haven't gone over the dot at the bottom or the small little backwards R, right?
I think you're correct about that.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I'm being like that.
Yes, every now and then they toss in something we haven't had yet. Just for your information, that is the E vowel. Bechi. Bechi.
Okay.
Is that the yod? Is
Yeah.
that yod? Is
Yeah.
that
It's a yod, but it's yod, but it's also yod is used sometimes with that little dot to spell E.
oh, okay.
When you think about yod and what your mouth position is when you say yod and then you say the letter E, you can feel that your lips and everything are pretty much in the same position for yod and E. 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 It's like the end of an E sound. Yod is like the end of an E sound. Like in English, if you want to say, let's think of a word in English that begins with Y, which is like yod. Think of a word in English.
Yellow.
Yellow. So if you say E before yellow, it forms the Y for you. Yellow. Yellow. Feel that? Yellow. Because your mouth is in the same position, right? That E leads right into the Y position. Okay, how did that go with filling in the consonants?
Good.
Almost done?
Done.
Okay, on the top line, what did people write as the English equivalent of kuf?
K.
K.
K, very good, K. And for the mem, what letter in English?
M.
M.
Yes, it's practically identical in Hebrew and mem and M. Right. What about for Dalit? What's the letter in English?
D.
T.
D. What about for Vav?
V.
V. For Lamed.
L.
L. For Sadi.
T.
TZ. Some people spell it TZ. I usually spell it TS. But as long as you say it correctly, I'm happy. Okay. Resh. What letter in English?
R.
R.
R. And Kaf.
K.
K. Okay, very nice. All right, good work. Thanks for hanging in there. Thank you. And I would be so happy if some of you give the homework a try.
Thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Next week.
Thank you.
I'll see you next week. Happy. Oh, you know, I think we're meeting next week, right? Steve says yes, we are meeting next week. Okay.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
Happy,
Thank
healthy,
you.
enjoy Hanukkah. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Have a great
Bye.
week.
Thank you.
You too.